Disney is no longer referring to guests as ladies and gentlemen or princesses. How should we respond to that as Christians? You might say, PJ, that's not a big deal. It really doesn't matter to me. Well, it's bigger than that. It goes deeper than that. It's more blatant than that. So has Disney gone what we would call woke? Well, I want to talk about that today. And my response to that and my challenge to you might surprise you. So don't go anywhere. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Thinking Out Loud with PJ. Thanks so much for hitting the play button. That is such an encouragement to me. When you just watch my videos, it is my goal to help you think different, help you think biblically. And today I want to help you think biblically about this whole Disney thing. But before we get into it, I feel like I probably better say something to you, because if you're familiar with my channel, you will know that I think every single video I've ever done is very family friendly. And I'm not saying this one's not family friendly, but we're definitely going to use some terms that I wouldn't use around my little kids right now. They're not bad, but they're terms that might cause some questions. We're going to be just kind of upfront about this thing. So just so you know, before you keep watching, you might want to just wait, maybe hit the pause button and go to another room, or make sure your kids are playing, because we're going to dive into this a little deep here. So let's go for it, guys. Let's just get right into it. I really kind of thought I would share maybe some videos or articles with you, and then I thought, they are everywhere. They're everywhere on YouTube. You guys can find them, YouTube, internet, wherever. You can find them. I'm just going to share some things, pull out some things that are really concerning, because it goes deeper than Disney saying that they're no longer going to refer to people as ladies and gentlemen and princesses. It's deeper than that. And maybe I should say this, just that alone kind of for me is a disappointment. I've never gone to, my kids have never gone to Disney. We've never taken them to Disney as a whole. We were in Orlando a couple of years ago, and here's a little tip for you. This isn't a travel channel, but this is a tip for those of you that want something from that. Here's the tip. If you go to Disney, if you're in Orlando looking for something to do and you want to ride the tram at Disney, it's free. You have to pay for parking. Unless you go late enough, you'll have to look it up. I think it was like 6 o'clock. So we went late enough, free parking, jumped on the tram, and just rode around so our kids could see the castle and some cool things like that. Anyways, while we were there, I noticed that my kids were referred to as prince, princess, ladies and gentlemen. They loved that. So for me to go and not have them referred to that way, man, that's a disappointment just for that alone. But they have decided now that they're going to refer to people as dreamers and friends. And again, you might say, well, yeah, that's a disappointment, but that's not as big of a deal. Well, it definitely goes deeper. Disney has openly now admitted, there's videos and articles floating around all over the internet now this week, that Disney has openly admitted that really basically they want to indoctrinate our children with what you and I would kind of call woke. Really, it's just worldly thinking. They're very clear that they are intentionally exploring queer stories. That's the terminology they use. They say we're intentionally exploring queer stories. As we talk about this, there is production managers and production executive. These are the people, and I'm not calling out their names on purpose, but these are the people that are saying this. It's people who are extremely influential in Disney production, and they're saying, hey, we are intentionally exploring queer stories. And then they're saying that really that what they're doing is they're circling this idea as really they've identified, according to them, they have not given fair screen time to these kind of people. So what we're finding now is literally they've said, the production manager said this, he said they've created a tracker. So the system of tracking people who are what they consider gender non-conforming characters. Okay, so they want to track these characters, and they have figured out that as they have tracked the characters, that they have had gender non-conforming or queer. They've used all these different names in the background. One lady actually bragged about a show that actually was a cartoon from years ago. She came to Disney, and she had that, she would put in the background same gender kissing or different things like that, and just to see what she could get away with, see if Disney would stop her. And they didn't, and so she just became more and more blatant with it, and she's now the executive producer of Disney, and they're saying, look, we have identified that these people are not having enough screen time. They're not front and center enough. So we are going to make sure that when we make videos, when we make movies and shows, that non-conforming genders, LGBTQ, all these, they're going to be front and center in the face of our kids, because we want to make sure that they're saying that we're giving these people proper due. And interestingly enough, one of the guys said, who was a production guy, he said that it's hard because when they identify a trans person, you can't look at a person and see that they're trans, so they actually have to put more work into the backstory and let them live this story that he literally says that allows them to be their whole self. This is disturbing for Christians, okay? This is disturbing, and I'm starting to see some response to that on Facebook from Christians. I'm starting to see some pushback and people, talking about dropping Disney, all those things. And I'm not pushing against that, not at all. But I want to give us some perspective. I want to talk about really kind of 3 different perspectives that I think we should have as Christians as we walk through this, because I don't want us to just react necessarily. I want us to learn from this. I want us to understand what's happening. Perspective number 1 is that Christians are being caught off guard. And you might be saying, PJ, well, that's not a perspective. Well, really what I want you to do is change your perspective, because your perspective, often what I'm seeing, maybe not your perspective, but what I'm seeing among Christians is this perspective that this is the fault of wokeness. We're blaming it on wokeness. The reality is, as Christians, we're actually probably have allowed our culture to influence us. And we look at wokeness in this movement and we're saying it's changing our country, but really the problem isn't wokeness. Wokeness is a symptom to the problem. The problem is sinfulness. The problem is we live in a dark world. Wokeness is just a symptom of that. So whatever we want to call it, there's this sinfulness in our world, and we should never be surprised when things get more sinful. Romans 1:18, Paul says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men." And then he says this, "who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth." Paul calls it out. What are they doing? By their unrighteousness, they are suppressing the truth. By their unrighteousness, Disney, or you name it, Disney is the one in the center here right now, but a few months ago it was Target, or it's you name it. They are suppressing the truth, partly because really they don't know any better as Christians, and maybe you say, well, they do, but let's think about this. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. It says, "And if our gospel is veiled," Paul says it's veiled to those who are perishing. Again, and when we are interacting with the world, we are interacting with people who are perishing. Therefore, the gospel is veiled. You and I see truth. You and I see the truth. We see the sin. We have a clear understanding, but they don't, because there's a blindness. Paul goes on, he says, "In their case, the god of this world, Satan, has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God." We're dealing with people who genuinely think they're making the right choices. They genuinely think they're doing what's best, and they're progressing the world in the direction it should go, because Satan has blinded their minds. So why should we be surprised when we see Satan blinding people's minds, we see darkness, we see the lost world suppressing the truth. We can't be surprised. So let's change our perspective and understand then what should we do? Because if we understand that it's not just Disney, or it's not just this other company, or it's not just this political party, or it's not just whatever it is, that it is the world, then we understand as parents, if our kids are in a public school, they're going to learn everything that Disney's trying to teach them anyways. They're going to learn it in the public school. Not only that, they're just plain going to learn it because they're in the world. So we're surrounded by it. It is not just Disney, it's the world we live in. So we need to make sure that we have the right perspective. The first perspective, number one, is not to be taken off guard, but know the world we're living in. Perspective number two, I want to say this. Don't confuse social change with the power of the gospel. Again, just a kind of an ache that I see is Christians who, because their perspective is not in the right place, they're trying to create change on a surface level. Okay, they're spending their time and their efforts fighting this. They're spending their time and efforts fighting Disney or whatever the company is or the influence is at the time. And the reality is they're probably not going to change. The truth is Disney could care less what Christians think. They don't care. They don't need our money. They're fine without our money. What we say doesn't matter to them. And so we're going to spend a lot of energy and time just for change, to change a company. And ultimately, guys, changing a company is not what's important. Yes, there is a point where we would say, okay, we're trying to make the world a better place to live in. And yes, we have that responsibility. But it's going to get worse. If we were somehow to change Disney's mind today, give them 10 years, and they're going to be right back where they were, or 5 years, or whatever it is, guys. We are not going to impact the change we want just by changing somebody's mind. We need to use the gospel to change the world. And we ultimately do that by changing the world around us. And my perspective is now, I don't want social change. I want eternal change. And I bring eternal change by bringing the gospel to my neighbors, my coworkers, my family. Not only that, but as a parent, what I have is a responsibility to prepare my kids to live in this world. Think about that for a minute. We are stressing over this thing that's outside of our control, but there's something that's inside of our control, and that's our kids that we have been stewarded with, that we need to be discipling, that we need to be teaching so that they can live in this world. If the world is this bad now, imagine the world 30 years from now when our kids are adults. Last perspective number 3, and I'm going to give you this perspective in the form of a question. Should we cancel them? Should we cancel Disney because of this? And I'm seeing a lot of people who are saying, hey, I'm done. I'm canceling Disney Plus. Here's my answer to this. I'm saying this as a person who at this time has Disney Plus in their house, okay, thinking this through. You have to make a decision for your own house. I've seen some great posts on Facebook of parents saying, all right, I'm done with Disney. We're moving on. We're doing something else. I don't want that influence in my house. And that's great. I totally support that decision. We very likely will probably come to that. But here's what I want to say. I just want to encourage you to do this before you just react, right? We talked about preparing our kids to live in this world. So here's what I want to ask you to do. Just be wise, be prayerful, and be wise, okay? Your kids, especially if your kids are in public school, but if they have friends that are unsaved, even if you cancel Disney Plus, and again, I'm not telling you not to, okay? But if you do, just know that even when you did, your kids are going to go to school or they're going to interact with their friends in the neighborhood, whatever it is, and they're going to hear kids talking about all of these movies that they're watching in their household. So you have to decide, because maybe you would prefer, okay, I think it's best that I cancel this. I want that out of my house. That's fine. Maybe you say, no, I'm going to keep it but we're going to carefully walk through these things as a kid or as parents. Now, I have to say, from our standpoint, we have already made a decision. We've already seen some of the new movies coming out that we have made a decision. Our kids are of the age, I'm not going to let them watch them. But as they got older, they're going to hear about those movies. They're going to wonder about those movies. They're going to be curious about those movies. Once my kids are old enough and we've exposed them and they're understanding those things, there might be a big wisdom in walking through these movies with them and explaining to them so that when they're in the world, they can engage culture, they can defend their own faith, and they can understand, look, mom and dad are not just telling me, no, I can't watch this movie, but rather they're understanding why, and they're understanding how to engage with people, and even teaching them that because somebody has a different view than you, because somebody supports this, because somebody thinks this is okay, we don't hate them. We're not against them. They need the Lord. We need to love them. We need to care for them. We need to be able to engage culture so we can take the gospel to them. Our kids need to know how to engage culture. And as a parent, you need to decide what is the best way to do that. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. This was a longer video than I usually make, but there was just a lot I felt like I needed to cover. And I really hope this helped you think the way that you should. If it did, make sure you share it with somebody. And we'll see you in the next video.